Hello everyone and welcome to another video. In this one we're back with History Legends.
Hello everyone, pleasure to be here.
Alright, so what are we doing today?
I actually have no idea. You just told me to show up. I see there's a video in Danish, I think.
Yep.
So I'm like, have no clue. I'm fresh, so surprise.
Alright, so what we're doing today is that we are reacting to a video. This is a series on Danish national TV where there's a journalist who invites two military academics from Denmark and the Danish army. These two guys are mayors in the Danish army, and they are studying or researchers in the Danish Institute for Military Studies. And essentially the journalist is asking questions for the general population about the war at simple level, and then they try to explain what's going on. So we will be reacting to their understanding of what's happening in Bakhmut. I've chosen out separate parts of this video that we'll be reacting to. Don't worry, nothing's taken out of context.
It looks very serious. The two majors, the big map.
Exactly.
It looks serious.
Honestly, it's beautiful. Like they have their screen in the background. This is like high budget.
This is the setup I need. This is the setup I need.
All right. So I think we should just go straight into it, and then we'll see what happens. Also, it will be in Danish, so I'll be translating it live.
Oh, okay.
De prøver, hvis jeg må låne, vi har talt om den her russiske.
So we've been talking about the Russian spring offensive.
Så prøver russerne i en 4-5 akser i området her.
So the Russians are trying to advance from 4 to 5 different axes in the Donbas region, but specifically with a lot of weight in Bakhmut. So they're trying to push out the Ukrainians from the Donetsk and Luhansk fronts.
På den anden side, der står så en masse ukrainere, eller rettere ikke står, de er gravet ned.
On the other side, there's a lot of entrenched Ukrainian soldiers.
Og Bakhmut er blevet sådan et tyngdepunkt, både fordi det er en by med en masse færdselsårer, der går igennem, men også er den formentlig blevet så vigtig, fordi russerne har brugt så mange ressourcer på at forsøge at erobre den.
Here he says that the Russians are making a lot of effort into taking the city because it is the heavy point, gravitational attraction point of this front, as there's a lot of roads that goes in and out of it, and that essentially makes it very important for the Russians. And because the Russians are putting so much effort into taking it, so essentially, the Russians are trying to take this because of the roads, and because they're putting so much effort into taking it, the Ukrainians are putting equally as much effort into keeping it, to prevent any Russian offensive from springing from that area.
As of now, everything seems correct. I mean, the information for now, it seems pretty good.
Okay. And he also says that it is also important for both sides due to how much they are putting into this. Because of how many soldiers and ammunition and all of the resources they're pouring into this, it makes it very symbolic for either side to win this. If the losing side in this will have a huge catastrophe resulting from it, because of how they will have spent all of these resources for nothing, essentially.
Yeah.
So that is the first part. And honestly, I don't think I have anything to add because they covered very well.
For now, it's pretty well. I mean, if it's for an audience that has very limited knowledge, this is a good introduction. Yeah.
Also, it's very specific to the Donbas region. I think it's very interesting that they're talking about a Russian spring offensive as it's guaranteed to happen. We've so far seen no indication of any offensive, despite me keep talking it up that there is going to be an offensive. I've seen no evidence so far of an offensive coming, so maybe they know something I don't.
Maybe it's a Danish thing. I don't know.
Maybe
it's a Danish thing. Maybe.
All right. Next part is this part here. You don't have to skip anything.
I virkeligheden strategien.
Altså det er indlysende, at begge parter selvfølgelig vil prøve at erobre land. Og det, der er pointen med det, russerne gør, som også Mikkel sagde før, har forskellige akser, Og det, der nok er russernes forhåbning, det er, at på et eller andet tidspunkt, så vil en af de akser være lønne i forhold til at kunne lave gennembrud. Og så er forventningen, at de så kan have nogle styrker, de kan sætte ind, have udsparet forhåbentlig en reserve, som de kan sætte igennem. Og tilsvarende, ukrainerne har samme forhåbning. De har den forhåbning, at
Okay, so no more translating.
I'll translate at a good point.
Høje russerne sammen kan nedslide russerne, og så med vestlige våben kunne lave en tilsvarende reserve, så de kan lave gennembrud.
Okay, this is a good part to stop. Okay, so essentially what he says here is that the Russians are attacking from these 5 different directions, and these, just so you know, they have been talking a lot about it in Danish media. It is the Liman area, Siversk, Bakhmut, the Donetsk front itself, as well as Uledar. Okay. So in these 5 areas, the Russian forces are attacking. And he explains here that the Russian forces are attacking on these 5 different areas at the same time in hope that just one of them succeeds, that just one of them gets a breakthrough. And as soon as one of them gets a breakthrough, here he has this tank here, he indicates that the Russians have a mechanized armored brigade or division in reserve behind the front line. And that as soon as one of these 5 areas gets a breakthrough, this division will go in and take advantage of it.
What division is it? Because I didn't see it on any map or something like that. So I'm very curious to know which unit he's talking about specifically.
I think generally the maps haven't showed it because there isn't a name for it. As I'm pretty sure from the information I have that they are building it in Mariupol. There's been a lot of news about troops going in and out of Mariupol, specifically a lot of military hardware. That is because in Mariupol, there's the port where the ships can unload directly onto rail lines, onto trains. So from Mariupol is the best way to transport quickly to any part of the Donetsk front.
Okay, but if there's a breakthrough at Bakhmut, they have to go all the way from Mariupol to Bakhmut.
I think they have 2 in reserve. I think there's the one in Mariupol, but what we have seen is that they have 3 divisions in the Liman area. So I think they're trying to push through in Liman. If they get a breakthrough...
They have the 90th 90 tank division in Crimea.
Exactly.
So in the Liman. So
and that's right next to it.
Yeah, that they could intervene. So and they're in reserve, so they could intervene relatively quickly anywhere.
Exactly. So I think they have Mariupol for Ukledar or Donetsk. Then they have the Crimea one for Liman or Bakhmut or Siversk, this area here. So I think they have these 2 ready. So I think they're actually trying to get a breakthrough in both areas, not just one of them.
Maybe. This is probably what they're trying to do. Let me check on the Deep State, what they say quickly. So the Deep State shows the 90th. I have trouble. Other than that, you have paratrooper units, no real tank division. The real tank division, it's located in Crimea. So I mean, and it didn't really fight in Crimea either, so they could really deploy fast, possibly. I don't know.
And at the same time, the military analyst here says that the Ukrainians are hoping to counter that rapid deployment armored division by creating their own, or possibly using their own for an offensive. Well, he later talks about that later, so I'll talk about it later. But essentially, he says that the Western weapons, the Western tanks and so on, will be used to create an armored division purely with these Western weapons to counteract the Russian one.
So he says it's to be used in the Donetsk front and not in Zaporozhye.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Måske mere nede sydpå af budet med henblik på at nå til havet.
Now he talks about Zaporizhzhia.
Og afskære russerne hernede i Kherson-regionen.
Men det vi ser lige nu, er det i virkeligheden mere en forberedelse til det, eller er det en del af sådan en langvarig proces, som skal til?
So the question he asks here is this for the offensive,
flytter sig så
Or what
meget.
exactly is it going to be when the front isn't moving that much?
Vil være en forberedelse til en form for angreb. At det tager så lang tid, er måske mere tegn på, at
Then he talks about how the very slow advances by the Russian forces is mainly because the Russians are trying to prepare for an offensive with these 5 different axes of attack. But how long it takes for them to prepare for it is probably out of their calculations. They didn't expect it to take that much.
Lad os lige prøve altså at
Okay, so that was the third part. And then he says that because of how long it is taking, it is questionable whether or not the Russians will be able to launch an offensive. So I personally have 2 issues with this, but I'll let you go first.
So what's the question exactly?
Why are the Russians taking so long, and is it a preparation for an offensive?
The reason why it's taking so long, and what I find it funny is that people forget past battles, but the duration is not about the size of a town or anything. It's just because there's a lot of soldiers there. You know, Ukraine, I estimate, have at least invested 100,000 men into Bakhmut in and around. So when you put 100,000 men, it takes time. This is the reality. Even with artillery shell, and Ukrainians are capable. They build excellent defenses, multiple lines of trenches, and they have modern equipment too. So it's very difficult to do this. And the Russians are not the Soviets from World War II that have unlimited manpower and can just ram through without caring about casualties. The Russian army, the modern Russian army, is much more careful. So it takes time. You know, it's a trade-off. You know, if you want to limit casualties, it takes more time, more preparation.
You literally have history in your name, so I'll also refer to history. So essentially, what I think when they talk about this is the Second World War, when Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union. We saw from in early 1941, when the war started around May or June, all the way to like late summer, they took huge spans of land, like thousands of kilometers. And then winter hits and it all gets stalled. And then we see a lot of positional fighting. They advance further, they get pushed back, all of this happening. And then comes the Battle of Stalingrad. They fight in Stalingrad for over half a year. Similar to Bakhmut in the length of time that they fight in, but of course in a much larger scale. The whole war was in a much larger scale. But essentially, they can take thousands of kilometers within a few months, but they can be stuck within a single city for over half a year. So time is really relative when it comes to war. Same with space. Like, it doesn't determine how you are winning or losing by how fast you're taking territory, but how many men you're losing while doing it and how many soldiers you're killing while doing it. Those are the most important factors, because they'll determine what happens after.
Yeah, and also in the way that time is relative, you have breakthrough moments. So sometimes you work and it doesn't move, and at one time you push and it has a huge move. So for example, what I'm referring to is that Bakhmut, it took a long time, but we agree that since Russia took Solidar, it's going much faster, because that was the nut they had to crack to do their thing. So, you know, yes, it took a long time. Now it's much faster. Like every day now, you make videos. You make Rommel. This is what I call him. Everybody, I call him Rommel. I don't even have time to breathe and read the document that he's already put a video about it. Every day, oh, here's a new advance. Here's a new advance. Yeah, well, now it's moving fast.
Yeah. Honestly, I have like one of my very first videos, and in my last live stream, I went and reacted to it live. But one of my very first videos is one where I analyze what I expect to happen in Bakhmut. And in that video, I talk about how Solidar is the most important part because it separates Siversk from Bakhmut. by cutting or taking Soledar, essentially Bakhmut and Sivers becomes two separate fronts rather than one combined front. And that is very significant because the defensive line that Ukraine put up was the Sivers-Bakhmut line.
Yeah, and the strategic thing is that when I remember in July or something like that, when the Russians were pushing away from Zichansk, this is the first time I talked about the Battle of Bakhmut, but I showed the maneuver from the north and the south, and there's always if conditions. It's the same when you code a program. It's if this, then that. So the Russians would have to take this position. If the Russians take this, this, and that, then we can talk about the Battle of Bakhmut. And people forget that there was a ridge south of Soledar that the Ukrainians were holding on to, and the Russians were not breaking through. The moment they broke through this ridge, things went really fast.
Exactly. Now, the last part to this is... My phone keeps closing. There you go. Okay, the last part to this is the longest part, and it goes... I've separated it into two parts. It is...
You mean the rest? The third part is 25 minutes? That's what you mean when it's the longest part?
No.
25 minutes?
The last half of this video is...
Nice try. So you say, okay, the first is 10 seconds, the second is 20, last part 25 minutes.
Okay, so the last half of this video is a Q&A, so we're skipping that. So what we'll be watching now is from minute 9 to 11.
29.
9 points.
20 minutes of Danish, and then you'll translate 20 minutes.
Exactly. That is how you make the video long.
Yeah. It's smart. I'm smart.
All right.
Rommel, once again.
There we go.
At de russiske besættelsesstyrker eller er nødt til at flygte osv.
Og Esben, hvis du ser på det sådan militæranalytisk, er der
If you look at this militarily,
der
analytically...
tyder på, at det går den ene eller den anden vej i Bakhmut?
Okay, I remember this part. This is the one where we're going to... This is the part where the Western propaganda comes in.
Oh.
What is the question he just asked? He asked, is there any indication that the Battle of Bakhmut is going one or the other way?
There's no indication.
That is exactly what he says.
It's a myth.
No, there's no indication.
Nej.
Fremtrængning, russerne har både nord og syd for, altså i forsøg på at omslutte byen. Så den seneste måned har det stået, i betragtning af, at det skal være en omslutning, så er det stået
We don't see any
meget, meget stille.
So he says the Russians have advanced for the past month.
Og i tilknytning til det, som ikke siger, altså ukrainerne har jo før vist sig i stand til, eller villige til at trække sig tilbage fra udsatte positioner.
But the Ukrainians have shown that they are willing to retreat from unfavorable positions.
Preservere deres styrker, altså de kan ikke tillade sig at have så store tab, som de vil få ved en omslutning.
Okay. Now we have to talk about this. That is the first part of the last part. He says, the question is there any indication that the Battle of Bakhmut is going one or the other way? Then he says, no, there's no indication.
Obviously.
The Russians have advanced for the past month, and the Ukrainians have shown their willingness to retreat out of unfavorable positions. Okay, so the first question, is it going one or the other way? Then he continues to speak about Russian advances and Ukrainian retreat. How can he deny it and then contradict himself in the same sentence?
It's like saying, no, I'm not losing money, but my bank account keeps reducing. What?
No. It's like saying, I'm not broke. I just choose not to pay.
I can't pay. I'm not broke, but I can't pay.
Yeah, exactly.
But I also expect them to say the Russians are suffering 1,000 casualties every day. So I'm like, I expect it. But it's, I mean, is this really an analysis? I don't know. I can watch CNN for this, but let's continue.
Ukrainerne vil også have en interesse i at trække sig tilbage, før de får for store tab. Og det de før vist, at det er det, de er villige til at gøre.
Okay, so he here says that the Ukrainians are most likely going to retreat because the losses that they will take by not retreating is too much. They cannot keep up with that many losses.
But the battle is not going one way or the other.
And then he
But
says,
the battle is not going.
yeah.
Okay.
And then he says that they have shown previously, if they're taking too many losses, they'll retreat. I'm guessing he's referring to Lysychansk here, because in the Severodonetsk-Lysychansk battle, they took a lot of losses, so they retreated from Lysychansk before getting encircled. However, as I just posted in my latest video, a few hours before recording this, of course, he doesn't know this, but it was clear that it was going to happen before or after. But essentially, I report that Bakhmut is operationally encircled. And I say that because Yahidne and Dubovo-Vasilivka have been taken by the Wagner PMC. So there's no villages. There's only like 2 kilometers of open field between the Wagner position and the final road in and out of Bakhmut. So the Russian forces, the Russian tanks, the Russian artillery, it can all hit the roads directly. There's nothing between them. They're even at a high position topographically compared to the road. So with Bakhmut operationally encircled, and there's been no indication whatsoever of Ukrainians retreating out of Bakhmut the past couple of days.
I think that they won't retreat. I don't.
Yeah. So there's no indication of any retreat. So essentially what he's saying is that the losses in Bakhmut will be too big if they don't retreat. And now we see them not retreating.
But the battle is not going any other way. You know, the battle is not.
It's not determined
yet. We're talking
yet.
about the Ukrainian army getting encircled, you know, but the battle is not going any direction. It's not the road. Okay.
It's perfectly balanced, also all things should be.
Yep.
Men altså, omvendt så er russernes mulighed er jo netop at når du angriber, vil du typisk tage flere tab i den type kamp.
When you're attacking, you take more losses.
For at tilføre den forsvarende part store tab er netop
pause.
Og det er tydeligvis det, russerne har forsøgt.
It's so dumb because when the Americans attacked the Islamist insurgents or Taliban or in Somalia or something like that, if they were attacking a position, would the Americans lose more men than the defenders? When they attacked in Iraq in 2003, would they suffer more casualties? Or would they blast the defenders into oblivion and then march in?
Actually,
so it's not a question about the attacker takes more losses. No, it depends on the firepower.
Actually, despite what you're saying, I checked the casualties because I was actually interested. For example, in Afghanistan, they are actually in favor of the Taliban. The US allies and the Afghan army, like the National Afghan Army, took more casualties than the Taliban.
No, I know, and this is what I talked to a lot in my, especially on Instagram back in the days. You know, I put the comparison, and it's very similar to in the Vietnam War too. The Americans say, yeah, we only lost 60,000. Yeah, but the South Vietnamese army that was with you lost 300,000.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, you know, so it's complicated. It's complicated, and it's. Yeah.
But we should watch a bit more because he does mention something about the Russian tactics really soon.
I over en måned nu, og det er det, der virker som om, at det er kørt meget fast. Hvis jeg skulle være en lille smule uenig med Esben, så skulle det være, at nord og syd for, altså i typisk tage flere tab i den type kamp, som vi ser der. Og en af mulighederne for at tilføre den forsvarende part store tab er netop at omslutte dem. Og det er tydeligvis det, russerne har forsøgt.
Okay, he says that typically in a urban warfare battle type, the attacker will take more casualties than the defender. However, that is why the Russians are trying to envelop the city, because that is the only way for attackers to take less casualties than the defenders is by encircling the city.
Yeah, maybe, but once again, during the Battle of Hue in the Vietnam War, the Americans stormed the North Vietnamese positions, and did they lose more troops? Not really. So I think, once again, it depends on firepower, air support, a lot of things, you know?
Yeah, so many things.
I over en måned nu, og det er det, der virker som om, at det er kørt meget fast. Hvis jeg skulle være en lille smule uenig med Esben, så skulle det være, at den bevægelse, russerne har nordfra, dem der kommer her ind nord for
Bakhmut, at de har fremgang. Det går utrolig langsomt. Det foregår på den måde, at russerne de sønderbomber et område, og så prøver de at angribe det, indtil de får rykket et par 100 meter frem, og så
Okay, so here he talks about the Russian strategy. He says that what the other guy said was essentially the Russians are just trying to envelop the city, so they'll keep pushing until they do it. Then he says, I disagree with that a little bit, because the strategy of the Russians isn't just to attack the enemy position, it is to blow it into smithereens and then attack it, advance a few hundred meters, and then blow the next place up into smithereens and then take that place. So exactly what they're doing. That is what they're doing. If you look at after the fall of Soledar, the first attack Krasnogora, they put everything into that, blew it into nothingness, and then Pereskovivka and so on.
We talk about the concentration of forces. So it's not only blowing a place up, it's putting all your men and effort into that one position and overwhelm the defenders. So they also forget that, if you attack one-on-one, the defender has a chance, but 3-1, it's going to be more complicated. And if the attacker has 10-1 advantage, the defender has no chance.
And I believe an indication that the power balance is going more and more into the favor of the Wagnerians. Okay, so a quick note.
Yeah.
I think it's very, very, very difficult to figure out the casualties of either side.
It's not possible.
In these, yeah, exactly. It's impossible when you don't have any of the information that is necessary to determine. And even for the ones who do, it's very difficult for them as well. But something that can give an indication of the casualties is how the future battles turn out. And I believe that after the fall of Soledar, it still took a long time for the Russians to take Bakhmut, Krasnogora, and so on. But in just, I think, 4 or 5 days, the Russians or the Wagnerians have managed to capture 4 or 5 villages in the northwest of Bakhmut. So either the Ukrainian fortifications are much weaker, or they've taken a lot of casualties, which makes it very difficult for them to defend.
Well, Blahodatne, there's the river they had to cross, so they benefited from the terrain advantage. But now this is what we call breakthrough, because they don't have time to establish new positions. So it's always a bit ad hoc defense, and it's a bit messy. And this is when the attacker has an advantage, actually, when the defender is a bit lost and they don't know what's going on.
And this is also the time where the defenders takes the most casualties.
Correct. Yeah.
And this is why I also reported this on my latest update, but essentially the Ukrainians blew up a dam to the northwest of Bakhmut to cut off from the Yahidna area, which means that the Ukrainians retreated from that place into Bakhmut and then are preventing a Russian advance from there.
Some people say that it's the Russians blew it up, but I think it makes more sense that the Ukrainians did it.
I saw an article that said it, and it had a video coupled with it and so on. So I think it's the Ukrainians, but I don't know. It's the same with the bridge to the west of Bakhmut. Some say it's the Russians, some say it's the Ukrainians. Who knows?
True.
Yeah.
Sønderbomber de næste, og så får de rykket. Det er en utrolig dyr og langsom måde at komme frem på. Men på et eller andet tidspunkt, så kommer de måske så langt frem, at de virkelig truer Bakhmut. Lige nu kan de skyde ned på den vej, der går nord ud af byen. Den anden store vej, den går sådan mere stik vest ud af byen. Hvis de begynder at kunne true den også, så kan det godt være, at ukrainerne på et eller andet tidspunkt bliver nødt til at trække sig.
Okay, so here he says that the Russians took control or fire control over the northern part. This is, by the way, on the 22nd of February, so 3 days ago. So they have somewhat up-to-date information. It's just who they choose to believe. They're most likely like looking at the Institute of Study of War or something like that, and then they would have the Russian claimed advances, and then they'll take that as false, and then look at the Ukrainian accepted Russian advances. So this is why he claims that the Russians only have fire control over the northern road and doesn't completely control it, which they've done for like over a week now.
Pictures don't count, you know. But okay.
Yeah, exactly. So essentially what he says is that the Russians' advance or method or tactic is very expensive because they use up a lot of ammunition.
Yeah.
I agree with that. But then he then turns to say that the Russians only have fire control over the northern road, and if the Russians start having fire control over the western road, then the Ukrainians would retreat. Or if there's a danger of the Russians getting
But that's the
fire
current
control.
situation,
Yeah,
and they're
exactly.
not retreating.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. The Russians
But you see,
now.
this is it. This is I made a video that literally says, Zelensky, pull back your men, because I was like, it doesn't make sense anymore. And this is exactly what the Danish command says. It's like, okay, the position has been overrun, retreat, and let's do something else. But I have the feeling that they want to recreate the Mariupol battle, and this is criminal. This is criminal because I think it's very nasty too, because instead of Mariupol, and it's sadistic in a way, they positioned territorial defense units in the city and not the elite forces, and they put the territorial defense within Azov brigade, to control them. So they didn't put all the elite troops, they put the second tier mobilized men into this trap, and they removed their mechanized forces. And they hope that the Russians will lose a lot of time trying to grind down through the urban area. And that's the calculation. If they don't retreat, that was their idea.
I also think that generally this encirclement is most likely to cost Ukrainians 10 to 20,000 soldiers, because that is the estimate of how many are within the city. And I think that is just like a waste, despite getting maybe a week or a month more time with the city. It doesn't benefit them strategically at all. Like the West has been saying for months, Bakhmut has no strategic advantage. So why are they sacrificing 10 to 20,000 troops getting encircled in the city for this? Like I said in our last compilation or talk, when it was all four of us, the next defensive line for the Ukrainians, which they should have taken over a month ago, was the defensive line by the canal. They should have retreated from Siversk, retreated from Bakhmut, and taken that position. It has the high ground, it has a canal, it has everything you want in a defensive position. Yet they refuse to retreat from Bakhmut.
Yeah, because they decided to transform it into a political objective, like Stalingrad Stalingrad became a political objective when, let's be real, it wasn't that important.
The importance of Stalingrad was that it had the name of Stalin.
Some claim that,
Yeah. All right. This is the final part of the final part.
20 minutes, let's go.
Vi får jo en masse gode spørgsmål fra seerne, og vi har også fået et, som lidt vedrører det her, fra Tobias Walter, som...
Wait, never mind. That was the final part of the final part. No, that was a question. We went into the Q&A section. So, yeah, so that was it.
Oh, that was it. Okay.
Yeah. We did it. We went through the Danish War Council.
So this is like the High Council of the Danish Army, and this is what
No. This is like at the Mid Council.
The Mid Council. Okay. But,
this is mayors who are only mayors because it is necessary for their study to study military strategy.
Oh yeah.
And then one of them was like a Navy guy. The other guy was like, I think
Navy. What
Air Force, Air Force and Navy.
What?
So like, where's the land forces?
Guys on the ground force. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Oh no. But yeah, so let's see. I don't think there's any indication that the battle is turning into the favor of anyone. I think it's a myth.
It could go either way, honestly.
Could go either way,
Yeah.
It could go. Nothing has been decided.
I'm sure the Ukrainian Steiner is coming for a great counterattack.
Yeah. I mean, maybe. But the problem I see, long story short, is that the Russians, I think, want the Ukrainians to abandon the city. And I think at this moment, if Ukraine has not yet retreated, Ukraine will not retreat. Because every hour now, it's getting more complicated to withdraw. If you withdraw, it's going to be a disaster, and a lot of units are going to get shelled. It's not going to be organized. Unless we hear that Ukraine sends massive reinforcements all of a sudden, and we know what it means when they send reinforcements into an impossible situation. It means that those units are bearer troops to help the others retreat. So we have to pay attention to this. If they send reinforcements, they don't send in reinforcements, they're gonna let themselves get encircled. And I think the goal for them is to reconquer the city later. You know, to have this garrison stay there and counterattack.
Yeah, I believe that this could go one of two ways. The first one is the one you mentioned. If they send troops to the flanks, I think that would be the Liman situation, in which when the Ukrainians recaptured Liman, the Russians pulled out. Then some units got stuck, so they poured units in again, defended the flanks, and then they retreated the soldiers, and then they fell back. That is the one option. The first option is that the Ukrainians send more troops for a retreat, to cover a retreat. The second option is that they leave the troops there and build a new defensive line, leaving the troops there just to buy time.
Yeah.
Because the Ukrainians don't have the capacity to do any counterattacks right now, or any offensives in the Bakhmut direction. First of all, they need their armored division with Western tanks. So far, they've received 4 Leopard tanks, and I'm pretty sure that's not enough for division. But knowing Ukrainian divisions, it could be.
I should ask the Danish majors what they think. But
Yeah. So yeah, essentially, we're seeing the Ukrainians doing an all or nothing in Bakhmut when it's really not necessary. I just don't know why he decides to gamble on this.
Yeah. I think, I think the political objective is that they promised that they would not lose any city anymore, and they put so much propaganda into their own population that now if they lose a city, people might lose faith. I'm just speculating. I'm just thinking out loud, but maybe that's the idea they have. So I don't know.
Well, I guess that'll be the closing remark. So yeah, thank you all for coming to this video. Thank you History Legends for meeting me and talking with this about this.
Thank you for inviting me.
Situation. As you mentioned in one of your videos, a comment asked you how many videos are going to make about Bakhmut. They have asked me at the same question. You've been making videos about Bakhmut for 4 months. How many more until it's taken? Yes. And that's going to be all for this video. Thank you for watching and have a great day.